Taoiseach, the migrant crisis re-emerging again threatens the future of the European Union. What specifically is Ireland going to do to forge a solution to that? And secondly, Micheál Martin accused you of believing you have the divine right to govern. Do you have the divine right, or should you cop on?
Well, look, I think first of all on the more serious matter, which is the migrant crisis. Been thinking about this over the last couple of days. Talked to colleagues, and my assessment is that this isn't so much a migrant crisis as a political crisis. The number of migrants crossing into Europe is a fraction of what it was 3 years ago. But we have a political crisis because of the fact that anti-immigration and populist parties have been very electorally successful in Italy and Central and Eastern Europe. So we do need to respond to the reality of that, respond to the fact that Europeans fear a return to the levels of migration that were there 2 and 3 years ago. And what we require is a three-pronged approach. First of all, Frontex, which is improving border security, and we're helping with that by participating in Operation Sophia, the Irish Navy there in the Mediterranean. Secondly is solidarity, us sharing the burden, and we're looking for solidarity on issues like Brexit, so we need to offer solidarity when other countries have problems too, and that's why we've agreed to accept 25 migrants from the Lifeline ship, which is going to be docking in Valletta soon, and we're going to take about 2,000 more migrants from Italy and Greece. Commissioned for 2 already arrived, so we'll obviously honour the full commitment of taking 4,000. And the third thing, which is probably the most important thing, is helping to reduce the push factors that cause people to risk their lives to cross the Sahara Desert, to go out in dangerous boats in the Mediterranean, to leave Africa for Europe. And the reason why people are leaving Africa in such big numbers is because those countries are unsafe, they're badly governed, and there's very little economic opportunity. So really what we need is more European action and more European money and investment to build up institutions, provide security and provide economic opportunity in Africa. And as a result of that, Ireland is agreeing to treble our commitment to the EU Africa Trust Fund. So we're going to increase our commitment to 15 million euros, and that'll be the third largest commitment per capita of any EU country.
Taoiseach, sorry, just on the Micheál Martin question.
On Micheál. Well, look, I don't particularly want to get involved in a tit-for-tat today. I'm here in Brussels doing important business on behalf of the Irish people. The only thing that I will say is that Fianna Fáil has been sending a lot of mixed messages about the Confidence and Supply Agreement. Last month they were openly talking about voting in favour of a motion of confidence in the Housing Minister. This month they're talking about not voting for the budget. So we really need to understand whether or not Fianna Fáil is committed to the Confidence and Supply Agreement in the long term.
Taoiseach, the European Council will say that member states and stakeholders should accelerate plans for a no-deal scenario. It seems to be that the Irish understanding of a no-deal would mean that the unconditional promise of no infrastructure at the border would come into effect. And this is a promise that the Irish side feels that the British have made via the joint report and other statements. Whereas the British understanding is that the unconditional support is only for the Good Friday Agreement, not the joint report. What's your understanding of what a no-deal scenario would mean?
Well, look, when it comes to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, my understanding is very simple. We don't want it. Britain doesn't want it, and the European Union doesn't want it. So we're not going to be preparing for a hard border on the island of Ireland, and we're not going to agree to anything that would give rise to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
If you're not preparing for a hard border, Taoiseach, what kind of contingency plans is the Irish government putting in place for a no-deal scenario?
Well, I should say we're not preparing for any sort of land border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we trust the assurances of the UK and the European Union that won't happen. However, if we have a no-deal Brexit, and that's unlikely but possible, then the United Kingdom will essentially crash out of the customs union and the single market, will not be able to trade freely anymore with any part of the European Union. It'll be losing access to a market of 500 million people, and that would require us to make preparations in our ports and airports for that kind of scenario, and that's the kind of thing that we will be doing. Other countries are going to do it too. It's not just an issue for Ireland, it's as important an issue in Rotterdam or Calais or the ports in the Netherlands, Belgium and France. So we'll have to start making preparations for that. Even though it's a very unlikely scenario, any responsible government has to make those preparations.
This was supposed to be the make or break summit for the Irish issue, yet it's not even on the agenda for today. What's your message to Theresa May, given the fact that the British just clearly haven't gotten their act together and putting a deal for consideration?
Well, first of all, it is on the agenda tomorrow, so whether it's today or tomorrow, I don't think is hugely relevant. And the deadline for a withdrawal agreement has always been October, and that's been the case from day one. However, we did expect that we would make more progress, or any progress really. We expected there would be progress at this summit in June, like there was in March and December. There hasn't been. So what I'll be saying to Prime Minister May is that we all need to intensify our efforts now. All of us want there to be a deal. We need a deal. Europe needs a deal, Britain needs a deal too. But as we agreed back in December and March, there can be no withdrawal agreement without an agreement on an Irish backstop.
What some politicians in the UK would say is that they're frustrated by the European side appearing to be very rigid, not offering any flexibility. Isn't there some responsibility on the EU side too that we've reached this stalemate?
Yeah, of course there is. There's responsibility on all sides, and we as Europe, 27 member states, are willing to be more flexible. But in order to be flexible, the United Kingdom needs to soften some of its red lines. There are things that we just can't compromise on. The four freedoms of the single market have to go together. You can't have one freedom or two freedoms or 3.5 freedoms, because if we were ever to agree to that, then the European Union would start to break up, and that is something that we can't ever contemplate.
Do you think Britain's being serious then in its approach? Because from the British side, there's no way they could accept those four freedoms.
Well, look, we're going to have to wait and see. We're awaiting a white paper from the British government as to how the UK and the EU sees its new relationship, or how the UK sees its new relationship with the EU. I think it would have been helpful if they had that white paper 2 years ago. You would have thought that before people voted to leave the European Union, they would have an idea what the new relationship might look like, but I appreciate that hasn't happened, and 2 years later it still hasn't happened. But we look forward to seeing that white paper on how the UK sees its new relationship with the European Union. But we're 2 years telling people that it can't be cherry picking, it can't be cake and eat it. So it needs to understand that we're a union of 27 member states, 500 million people. We have laws and rules and principles, and they can't be changed for any one country, even a great country like Britain. And any relationship that exists in the future between the EU and the UK isn't going to be one of absolute equals. We're 27 member states. The UK is one country. We're 500 million people. The UK is 60 million. So, that basic fact needs to be realised and understood.
Taoiseach, will you be telling Theresa May that she needs to move over the summer, or the withdrawal agreement is at risk? And are you really shouting for Belgium in the game tonight?
Well, look, I am here in Brussels, in Belgium, so of course I'm going to be cheering for the home team. But of course, if Belgium wins, England will probably get an easier ride in the next round. So perhaps it's one of those win-win scenarios.
And the first question?
Look, I'm not here to be telling Theresa May anything. She's Prime Minister of the country next door. We're going to need to work together. We do have shared objectives. That is to absolutely avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, and also to enable free trade to continue between the UK, Ireland and the rest of Europe. So we're going to be trying to work together.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.